Consultations. Today we are talking about everything education, and the topic is education in the context of COVID-19. There's been quite a lot happening, and of course we've heard government over time talking about the phased approach to education, and of course looking at starting with grade 12 and grade 7. A lot of concern has been raised by the parents, by the teachers, and government has made a lot of commitments. Next week is the beginning of the new phase. The 1st of June is when the learners go back to school. And of course, today we want to discuss if we are ready for this, or are we not ready for this, or what is it that we should do to be ready. Sia will project the bio to my panelists. Sia? So I'll introduce my panelists today. First, allow me to introduce the young lion, Noncedo Matubetube, University of Western Cape graduate in teaching. She has a Bachelor of Education and majored in maths and languages. She started volunteering at the Equal Education and was elected in 2018 as the General Secretary, the young General Secretary of EE. Noncedo, hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having us. It's a privilege as learners, I think, to be included in these types of conversations. So it's a pleasure to be here, Ian. And hello to everyone on the panel as well.
We're excited to have you. The next one is Professor Mary Metcalf, who prefers to be called by first name. Who doesn't know Professor Mary Metcalf? She's done so much. She started working in the education since in 1974 in various capacities. She's taught in the Department of Education at VETS. She was at some point, she was an MEC in the Gauteng. Sorry. She served in the Agriculture, Conservation, Environment, Land Affairs from 1999 to 2004. April 2004, she was elected as Deputy Speaker of the Gauteng Legislature. She was appointed as head of the VET School of Education. She has done research work and published on a variety of education topics, including special education, education transformation and government. And of course, till today, she's doing extensive research in that field. Mary, hello and welcome. You are muted, Mary, please unmute.
Thank you very much for the welcome. I'm very happy to be part of this Ayanda, and I'm looking forward to learning from the conversation. I'm not really an academic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on the ground, I would say.
We are happy to have you on the ground and in this conversation.
Thank you, Ayanda.
The next one is Mataganye, the General Secretary of the National School Governing Body. CEO project. Comrade Mataganye holds a postgraduate degree or qualification in education. He's a community intellectual. He's held many positions and in leadership particularly, and has been active in the National Education Union of South Africa, in SAFTU, Civic Association, the Midlands Education Council, and of course we can go on, but that's where we'll leave it for tonight. Comrade Mataganye, hello and welcome.
Hello, Ayanda, and hello, all my comrades there.
So tonight we're having this conversation, but we will not limit it to just us talking. We will also open the floor up to questions at certain intervals. But comrades, on Monday, schools begin. Are we ready? Should we be looking forward to this? What should have been done to prepare for this day? So we'll start with the SGB. Perhaps you can, you can assist us with this one. And of course, the other panelists will interject and communicate, making their contributions as we go along.
Thank you very much, Ayanda. And good evening once again for all my comrades there. We are not ready. I mean the system. The system is not ready.
Sorry to interject. Can you move your camera a little bit up? It's cutting your forehead. Just a little bit. One more time.
Okay. Do you see me? Am I right?
Yes, in that position we see you.
Okay, you see me. No, I'm saying the system is not ready to receive our teachers, to receive our children, in particular on Monday. In the sense that now, on the 26th of April, we met the minister and tabled the non-negotiables to the minister and requested the minister to go back and work on those non-negotiables. And then we once again met on the 11th of May, and we were told by the minister that out of 9 provinces, only 2 provinces are ready to reopen, which are Gauteng and Western Cape. So we had hoped that they will still go back and work on those 7 provinces pertaining to the non-negotiables. Now, we were really surprised on the 18th when the minister addressed the nation that the system is ready to receive the teachers and our children. But you would have witnessed that the system is not ready. Teachers are supposed to have reported on Monday, 25th. As I'm talking to you now, teachers have not yet reported back to school. And our children are expected to be received on Monday, whereas the teachers have not prepared. They do not have any preparations. And we don't know how our children are going to be received on Monday. Because it is true that it made sense when the teachers started on Monday, they were preparing for the children in terms of the non-negotiables, because one of the areas is that we said there must be water, running water in all the schools. Then you must also tell us within your plan the question of how do we observe the social distancing, and also the question of the PPEs, and how do we also observe occupational health and safety and safety regulations. Now, up to now, nobody knows who is going to receive our children and how are they going to be placed in classes and how are they going to be provided with the PPEs, and then in terms of how are they going to be provided with food, because they are provided with food. So there is no plan whatsoever. So we don't know where do they plan, because we thought then tomorrow is Friday, we'll be given a plan, or today we'll be given a plan to say this is the plan. As far as the non-negotiables, we're able to address this, we are able to address this, but we could not address this. How do you support us? We'll be knowing how to support them in terms of the plans. But as I'm telling you, there are no plans. So we are saying children cannot go back to school before the schools themselves become safe. Our children must be saved when they go to school. Not only our children, even our teachers. Because if we do not protect our teachers, within a week, then that school can close once again. Also, we do not know in terms of teachers who have got comorbidities. We don't know how many are they and how are they being replaced, because it's a process of recruitment. It's also a process because we must know out of 30 teachers, 10 teachers are teaching grade 12, but out of these 10 teachers that are teaching grade 12, 5 of them then are over 60, and 2 of them, they've got comorbidities. So we are going to replace them. We have replaced them, and this is the process quickly to replace those teachers in our school. So those things are not there, and it's just going to be confusion if then we allow our children to go back to school on Monday without a proper plan. Because our position as National Association of School Government is to support schools. And how do we support when we do not have a plan? But another thing is that now, for all this time, a school governing body in school have been not taken on board. Now you can hear different provinces talking about recruiting young people to come and work in schools. In some provinces, no, school governing bodies must hire people who are going to do deep cleaning and who are going to screen and all that. So there is really no tangible plan as so far now. We don't have the tangible plan. So I don't think the system is ready. The system is not yet ready. We really have to give them chance to once again go and plan. So once again, once a plan, and once they plan, they will tell us when are they ready. But the system, as I'm talking to, schools will not be open on Monday. Thanks.
Okay, before we go on to Mary Noncedo from Equal Education, are we ready? There's an announcement that was made that only 2 provinces are ready, Gauteng and Western Cape. Do you think we are ready? We would like to hear the contribution from EE.
Yeah, I mean, so what we understand is that all provinces aren't 100% ready at this point. And this was picked up through joining portfolio committee meetings where different provincial education departments are presenting in Parliament, and they're sharing that they've got different struggles around the decentralized approach to procuring things like PPE. So they're having issues with implementing agents in an ability to be able to procure and provide and secure in time things like the water tanks that have been promised by the Minister of Basic Education. Just today, in fact, the Eastern Cape was sharing that 756 schools in the Eastern Cape region need water tanks or the refilling of their water tanks. But they also reported that none of these things had been done. And this is the day before Friday, before the weekend before schools open. And we know that in terms of the procurement, just in the Eastern Cape of PPEs, the different districts are varying between 23 and 66 years having procured the necessary PPE for the initial grades coming back into schools. So in terms of the physical non-negotiables that allow us to go back to schools, I don't think we're there yet. Equal Education, I think, and its members have been holding an optimism that the Department of Basic Education, together with provincial education departments, would get to a point of getting our schools ready, because learners want to go back to school. During the lockdown, we ran an internal survey of over 400 members. And the different issues that came up were around food insecurity, were around a need for mediation and structure inside their learning, issues around connectivity and data, and especially the rural provinces. There was a need for web-enabled tools to help learners grapple with what's online, even what's on the television. Some learners said, look, we've got radio and TV sessions, but they're shorter than a classroom period, and there isn't interaction between you and the person that's teaching. So it's making things difficult for learners to catch up. And the young women learners in particular were concerned about
Oh, Noncedo, you're breaking up. You're cracking up.
the lack of balance between the amount. I wonder if it'd be better if I took my mic off.
Yes, maybe we should all just
take our videos off.
mute the videos, so that we can improve the quality of the sound.
Okay, just to finish off. So the overarching issue here for learners during lockdown is around the
Can I ask all, Noncedo, please hold on to that. Can I ask all comrades to mute their video? Just mute your video And to my panelists, you will just unmute the video when you speak. And everyone else, please mute your video. It's a kind request, comrades. We're trying to improve the sound quality.
So
Thank you to those who have. Comrades, please could you all unmute your videos? While we're struggling with sound with Noncedo, can I propose that Mary, we move on to you while Noncedo is probably trying to figure out where she could position herself? Prof?
Ready? Shall I stay off video?
Maybe just to show face, and then as you start to speak, and then you go off.
Hello, everybody. This is me. Now I'm going to go off video. So what I would like to do is to start off by saying that, yes, we are absolutely not ready. And the fundamental problem of why we're not ready is because of the process of reaching decisions and the way in which this has been regarded as a legal obligation of the national government. We have forgotten where we come from as the mass democratic movement, as the ANC. And I went back to the ANC booklet on an education and training system that was published in 1993. And it makes several important statements about policy that I think we've forgotten. It says if you're going to judge policy, and in this instance, I'm talking about the policy of saying schools will go back on Monday. It said, is the policy based on accurate knowledge? Now that's the first problem, is that the knowledge that they're basing this decision on at many levels problematic. Who has been involved? Oh, wait, let me just go out of full screen because I'm reading. I promise you this is not in my mind. Who's been involved in the process of policy advice and development? Let me say now that I think we will only begin to make progress towards the opening of schools if at least the minister and the MECs and the teacher unions and the school governing bodies don't sit down together as the people who must be involved in the process of policy advice and development. The Yellow Book goes on to say you've got to look at the conditions under which it can be implemented successfully. And at the moment, what's happening is that the national minister and MECs seem to be hopelessly out of touch. And there have been some disastrous interchanges in KZN, for example, between the MECs and the unions. Then this is my favorite bit. In democratic systems of government, policies must be arrived at through open social and political processes, which involve all major stakeholders and interest groups, which citizens feel free to influence. The policy and implementation can only succeed if the affected organs of civil society feel that they are partners with a stake in the outcome. Now, we already heard from Tux that school governing bodies were called, they were spoken at. The final position wasn't shared with them. And I think my understanding is that they weren't really listened to. And what we also know from the unions, the education unions that are involved in the conversations with the minister, that was their experience. So the confusion in the public, the confusion on the ground, the tensions between education officials and teachers, I think stem from the fact that we haven't had an inclusive process of determining this policy, which people were able to influence and where people weren't treated as if they were partners with a stake in the outcome. The tone of the consultations is very much, we are telling you. Now, until the key partners sit down and agree on where we are, what needs to happen, and how we can move forward, the rest of the public is going to be confused. Parents are only going to feel confident to take their children to school when firstly there's been an inclusive process and we've got all of the major stakeholders speaking with the same voice, and when they're confident that they can exercise their own agency by supporting their decision to take their child to school, by participating in community structures at local level to support the school to create a safe environment. I think that's enough from me for now.
Yes, maybe we should go back to Noncedo. Noncedo? Noncedo, are you there, comrade?
Thank you, Ayanda. I just wanted to make one last input. I wanted to capture some of the demands.
Maybe you should just, you know, we haven't heard quite a substantial amount of what you are saying because you were cracking up. Maybe you should just briefly try to remind us what you were saying earlier before you make your last input.
So learners have tried to hold the Department of Basic Education in sort of an optimistic sense, but we also do have 10 years of struggling for school infrastructure, for example, to prove and show that departments of education, provincially and nationally, simply sometimes show a lack of political will, but seem to not have the capacity and ability to organize themselves across departments to ensure that schools have the basic necessities. So during lockdown, I was sharing that some of the things that learners have gone through are around food insecurity, a lack of mediation and structure in their learning, connectivity, data, and access to web-enabled tools. And the young women learners have particularly shared discomfort and distress with having to do far more housework than schoolwork in their day-to-day. And as a result, have overwhelming challenges, psychosocial challenges that they are experiencing at the moment. And these are two-pronged. The one is that the experience of lockdown has been harsh. The second is that they are anxious about the health implications of going back to schools during this period, and because there are a lack of the basic necessities necessary that are outlined in the standard operating procedures, or what the minister called the non-negotiables, for schools to open. So we don't believe that schools are ready to open the 1st of June. We've been optimistic. We've waited the whole week to ensure that we get live reports from provinces to check what's going on. But parliamentary portfolio committee meetings from provincial departments of education have showed that across the board, so all 9 provinces are in fact not ready to open as per their own guidelines. So in the Eastern Cape, I made an example. There are over 756 schools that need water tanks. And the SG of education in the province today had said, look, none of these schools have been provided water or tanks at this stage. When you think about PPE, there is a rate of between 23 and 66% competency in the procurement of PPE in various districts across the Eastern Cape. So on Thursday, so on the eve of the weekend before schools open, a lot of schools, and I want to make the assumption here that these schools are in quintile 1 to 3, do not have the non-negotiables. So learners are concerned. They're also drawing from the insecurities and anxieties of their teachers, who also seem disorientated about whether they'll be going back to school or not. And they're holding 3 main demands at this point. So the one is that they are still looking for clear, detailed, and time-bound plans from all departments of education to figure out who exactly and when will they resource schools to meet these non-negotiables. Learners are calling for the eradication of plain pitta trees. They're saying that you need to ensure that all of our schools have adequate, safe sanitation facilities in order for them to meet some of the sort of regulations around how to protect yourself from infection. And the last is around, we do need a terms of reference that describes to us exactly what the independent consortium is going to be doing and how it's going to be able to, I don't know, fit itself inside the existing school community patterns. And the language of testing soldiers and the brigade is something that potentially will not assist ensure that these learners feel safe with these random strangers coming into schools. And what safeguards are in place to make sure that they do in fact run whatever systems that they sort of designed or hired to do. So these are some of the big things that we're asking. The last question is that there's also a big worry for us around the role of unions. We're concerned that unions don't, I don't know if beyond this platform it will happen, work hand in hand and hold in confidence civil society. So organizations like Equal Education rarely get to speak and sit around the table, discuss, plot, ideate, and plan with the teachers inside these unions. So I think something needs to radically shift inside the union base as well. Thank you very much for letting me go again.
Yes, what is very clear now is that you know, with everything that is happening, there's what has been exposed, and the light has definitely been shined on the fact that there's gross inequality. And one would want to question if those schools that claim that we are ready to proceed with education, would they then be allowed, irrespective of the fact that there's a vast majority of schools that are not able to do this, to deliver education? And I'm curious to know from you, Matakanye, what has been the discussion around the inequalities at schools?
Thank you very much, Ayanda, once again. You will remember that the minister was saying, if you feel you don't want to take your child to school, you can apply for homeschooling. What about a small school and all those things? So minister was trying to influence question of differentiated approach. And we are saying no differentiated approach. Because you see, if we allow differentiated approach, then it means you are further condemning the poorest of the poor, the working class, the rural, the deep rural schools. And the rich schools are going to continue. And for your information, the rich schools have been operating from the 18th to date. When the president locked the country, they used learning through online. Up to now, they are using then the poorest, the working class, the rural, the deep rural, they don't even smell the digital approach because they don't have anything. In some instances, they don't even have electricity. So all these gadgets, you can't use them to operate if you don't have electricity to start with. If then you have electricity, then it needs money to buy some of these gadgets. Data also must be bought and all those things. So these things have been not happening within the poor communities. But here we are today, we are saying differentiated approach. So simply means that now differentiated, those schools that have been operating from the 18th to date, then when you say differentiate, they're going to open and operate. Now, the question that we have to ask ourselves, how do you write an exam? How do you really write an exam? Are you going to benchmark these children equally to say, no, they've been, let's suppose we're opening schools in September. We are opening schools at least because we were told that now this pandemic is related to winter and all those. No, schools are going to open somewhere in December. At least we shall have managed that. Then what do we do about these children? What do we do with these children? Because the truth of the matter is, Ayanda, if we agree on the differentiated approach, is that now those schools that do not have water, we don't know when are they going to open. Those schools that have been overcrowded, schools that a teacher is equal to 80 children. Now that is now during the time of Corona, those schools now, that school, those children now must create 3 classes. In each class must, or even not that, must 4 classes. 20 children. Where do you place them? Have you organized the mobile class? Because you can't build a school in a week or 3 weeks. You can't build a school. Now, what do you do with that? When are we going to open? When are you going to organize those things so that now these children are treated equally to their counterparts? And then the question of the PPEs, rich schools have bought those things already. They have them, and they are trained how they are going to use them and how they are going to. I mean, we told them that, look, also bring parents on board so that now they will support teachers in terms of monitoring these children outside the class when they play, when they put on the masks, when they come from the toilets, when they wash their hands, and all. There must be altogether a different regime altogether. Now, if really we allow that, then we have condemned our children. Our children are condemned. There will never be a question of equality in this country. We are further entrenching inequality. Because Corona has exposed us to say in South Africa, there is no equality in terms of the provision of education. Because we should supposed not to have sitting here and debate this matter to say, no, in Nongoma, there are schools that there are no water. In Mahabing, there are schools that do not have water. I mean, we have created a survey and sent that survey. They tell us that there's no water. And it's very, very, very unfortunate that this pandemic needs water. There must be water. Now there is no water in those schools. I mean, the very same schools that I'm looking at, look how overcrowded the school is. So you have to create 4 classes. Now, the question that we ask is that now, recruitment, where does recruitment start? Because if this class was taught by 1 teacher, now it's going to be taught by 4 teachers. Now, when are you doing recruitment? And who is, now that the school governing body has been left out, now I don't know who's going to do recruitment, because from the onset, we're supposed to have been placed on par with them to say, in terms of recruitment, is the responsibility of the school governing body, they must. So I don't know who's, and when is this going to be done? And in terms of the deep cleaning and the screening and all those things, the provinces are different. Some will say, no, we are creating employment for young people, then we are going to place them into schools. At least they've got a plan. But in other provinces, there's nothing. There's really nothing. We don't have anything that we can talk about. So that's the problem that is facing the country. And the sooner they start addressing the non-negotiable, the better. Because we don't know when is this corona going to go away.
Okay, sorry for that, comrade. Yeah. I'm just conscious of time because I need to give space to the questions. But I also wanted to hear particularly to hear the input. Should we continue with the differentiated approach, or should we close this academic year? And if we close it, if not, you know, what are the alternatives that we are putting on the table? Are my panelists still here, Mary? Nongato, are you here, Mary?
Okay, maybe I'll go before Comrade Mary.
Okay.
I think because of how we understand and know our education system to look like, I mean, it's a direct representation of our country, deeply unequal. If we choose to not continue with this academic year, learners that can and are able to will continue to learn in whatever form and shape they can, homeschooling, different sort of platforms that their schools in Quintile 4 and 5 have already created and are working on curriculums as we speak. So it would be like an injustice to not continue the school year. What we're looking for here is the Department of Basic Education to reconsider the typology or the ways that they configure or understand what engagement looks like. When we've got teachers and members of SGBs that are part of Equal Education's membership saying everything feels like a top-down approach. So even correspondence between SGBs and NASGBs, for example, even correspondence between unions and teachers on the ground is feeling disentangled at the moment. And so because learners are often, as children, become the least and last to be considered in part of engagements, we really are calling for the Department of Basic Education inside the CEM meeting tomorrow with MECs to reconsider opening on the 1st. We're not calling for an absolute boycott of schools. We do want education to continue, but I think deprioritizing the safety of the school community would be a huge challenge to our communities in general and to the school community in itself. It's not going to buy anyone any sort of privilege or time or well worth to open and close and reopen schools because of a lack of inconsistency in ensuring that we procure the things that are necessary. And the school has time to think about how it develops the social behavioral changes that need to take place when schools open. We're excited for learners to go back. They want to go back. We also think that learners can be used as a vehicle to educate, inform, rearrange their own communities and thinking about how do we physically distance, how do we ensure that we adhere to sort of the hygiene and the sanitizing sort of requirements of the time we live in, because we know the virus is going to be around for a long period of time, and we need to reorientate our way of living and doing things. So we do want education to continue. That's for sure.
Mary, are you there?
I'm here. I'm going to put myself on video. So Nongero and myself talk often, and we're going to have to keep on talking about these issues. And I want to also engage my old comrade Tux on this matter. I think that we have to accept that schools are going to be at very different levels, and we should stop thinking about children going back to school as if we're going back to a high stakes learning environment. We want as many learners as possible to go back into a social environment of support, an environment where schools are the center of community mobilization, the center of community education, where nutrition is being provided, where teachers are able to support learners with a sense of normality. And we need to think about the opportunity for learners to go back to school with that frame. And we need to stop thinking about passing and failing and catch up. Because passing and failing and catch up is off the table as far as I'm concerned. We'll come back to grade 12s. Because we've lost so much of this year and we are going to lose more. Tux is correct that the DG and the department has said we have to have schools at 50% occupancy. Schools that are big are not going to have all of their learners at school all week, grade 12s aside. What that means is that grade 7s, grade 8s, grade 5s are going to be at school for some of the time. I believe that we need to bring those learners into the school environment because we're forgetting that this is not about the results. This is about learners who are anxious, learners who lonely, who don't have a sense of being part of the life that has now changed irrevocably. So let's get as many schools to open as possible, knowing that some of them may close again when they're worried about infection levels, knowing that they're not going to necessarily cover the curriculum, knowing that there's going to be a lot of work happening around schools to keep those learners safe. Is it going to be unequal? The inequality issue is an issue if we make it about passing and failing. Let's make it about deep education, about creating an environment of support. And actually, for most of our learners, it's better for them to be in school, getting regular advice from teachers in terms of what and why about the virus. At the moment, who's talking to our teenagers? Who's talking to younger children about what the virus means? Who's reassuring them? So let's reconceptualize schools as places of social support, of nutrition, of connection to community. And let's support our teachers and our school governing bodies to be able to frame it in that way and stop the high stakes talk, passing, failing.
Mary, can we really read the idea that if you go to school, you get better opportunities in life? And you know, the sooner you travel through your school years, the better your life will be at the end of the, you know. So I'm asking that question in relation to the inequality that will now prevail if we allow some and not allow some, relating to what Mataganya's contribution was.
Okay, let me be clearer, Ayanda. Schooling, we do live in an unequal society. As we speak, before Corona, There's huge inequalities, and you see those in the results. That's a discussion that I'm very happy to have another time. What we're talking about now is if some schools are not ready to open and others can open, can we change our thinking about what it means to be open? It doesn't mean we open so that you come in and cram to pass at the end of the year. No, we have to maximize learning at home and school. This is not about passing grade 8 and passing grade 9. That concept is going to fall away this year because nobody's going to cover everything that should have been covered, not even the top schools. Can we talk about opening our schools so that there's places where girls are safe, to pick up Nontedo's point, where learners are getting access to school nutrition, which EE and Equal Education Law Center and Section 27 have won. They have succeeded in getting the department to say that school nutrition must open when schools open. So there's many benefits of opening schools. And if we start saying we've got to close schools because not all schools are going to be open, it's going to be too complicated. Because let's take Thokoza, let's take Katlehong. Ekurhuleni is a hotspot. If schools have to close in Thokoza or Ekurhuleni, must they close in the whole of Gauteng? That, I think, is unsustainable, because schools can be places of meaningful support. And so let's think, do we want to have these sites where we have professional teachers supporting learners in this time, or are we going to say, no, nobody must be at school? So I might not be being very clear, but I really want to have a strong debate about this point, because closing schools indefinitely is good for nobody, and it's an 18-month journey. Schools must open when they're ready, and schools are going to come in and out of readiness as hotspots change. Let's keep schools places of pastoral care, of nutrition, and some learning.
All right. We will obviously come back to the discussions, but I just wanted to just quickly dash into the questions. I know before we started the session, we've already had questions that were submitted to us, and perhaps I'll just read them, and the panelists will take note of the ones that they're prepared to respond to assist us moving forward. The first one comes from a teacher. She says, we're a group of teachers writing this message. We are worried that our medical aid is not up to standard. Already we're rejected by some doctors because the government medical aid will not support us. Now we worry in the context of COVID-19, will we be taken care of? The second one is the social distancing. Our school infrastructure is not ready for that. There are not enough classrooms. Never mind classrooms, this one says, but further, the staff room itself where I teach is not big enough. And secondly, the construction of the school did not take into account such things that if we do social distancing during breaks, where will the learners wait in winter when it rains? Mm-hmm. The other questions that are coming in are from a parent. This parent says, I went to a township school. I have seen homeworks that my child brings home and I was never able to assist. How will I assist teaching, considering that it is way out of reach? There's been issues raised about the access to data, to equipment such as, ICT equipment. There's another one that comes from a teacher that says, in my school, it's a township school, we share a duster between the three of us in the grade. We have still not received dusters. Our children, they share textbooks. We still not receive textbooks. This is a school in Cape Town in the township. And she says there are no proper ablution facilities. And oftentimes, they're out of order. Would books be sanitized? And who would be sanitizing them? We've got concerns raised by teachers that say, we have teachers that have already tested COVID-19 positive. And government is very slow in responding and instead has subjected us to continue the work despite the fact that the school itself has not been fumigated or decontaminated. So it is such things that really worry a lot of us, because if you look at the aggressive spread of this virus, we worry that anyone who gets into contact with schools or get in contact with children and teachers might pose danger to the community at large. So where do we go to from here? Those are the concerns of parents, teachers, and the learners have, of course, stated that they are very scared. The one even indicated that my mother has asthma. So I worry that I'll take it home with me from school. What do we do? So to the panelists, those are the questions that you could answer. Shall we start with you, Matakan?
Thank you very much, Ayanda. I just quickly want to go into the contribution made by my comrade Mary there. And I think we must be understood very clearly. We all want our children to go to school, to go back to school. At no stage we have said no more schooling. Children should not go back anymore to school. All of us, I think parents are anxious for their children to go back to school. But the point that we are raising is that are the authority telling us the correct thing? If it is not the correct thing, they must tell us, because we are being told that water is important. Now, and it will not be me. Maybe the minister could do that, to say, okay, this year, let's close down the schools that are poor, the schools that are in the rural, the schools are in the deep rural, the poor schools, let's close them, and the capable school continue. I think that will be, so whilst they are looking into these inequalities, but we are not saying that. And we are not harping on that. We are saying coronavirus says if you want to manage it, wash your hands. Now, what do we do? And we said, no, let's go back to school. But what do we do in such schools? Abolition. What do we do? We do not want to see incident like the incident that occurred in one of the schools in Limpopo, in Moleji, if you remember, because I don't want to mention that because maybe the parents are getting closure, but we don't want to see such things happening in the school. We know that really we cannot build a school in a month, even in a year. But what do we do? What do we do with those schools that we have been reminding the department that they are overcrowded schools? Now, coronavirus is social. Now, the question that we ask is that how are we going? What plans do we have? But if that means that we say no, children should not go back to school, we know, and we are saying yes, and we have stated very clearly that look, if children go back to school, we must know how do we monitor them when we provide them with food. But as my comrade is saying, if the minister can come out and say no, we are no more writing an exam this year, because the truth of the matter is that if a different approach, I mean, a differentiated approach, then it means that now other children are going to write write exams and assessed better, and then the rest will not write. So I don't, and we are not saying, but I was saying we are not ready for Monday. Maybe the department must be given chance, a month probably, to prepare everything so that when we go back to school, we go back to school, all of us. Based on the questions that were asked by the teachers, yes, it is true. I mean, it is true that these things must be debated, that teachers are saying they don't have a medical aid that will cover them properly and all those. And these things must be debated to say, how do we help the teachers? You know, I think they talked about the social distancing. I mean, I harped on that question of the social distancing to say, really and true, we are not saying children should go, but we are saying, if school, we know that these schools before the coronavirus were overcrowded. What is it that we are doing? We just want a plan. And if and especially if the government says they don't have money to do, why can't we talk to the communities and say, communities, we don't have enough. What do we do? What do we do? And communities, I think they will come on board and support, because this is only the government that can say we can't do this. So how do community help us? Because the law says no, there are no fee schools and the fee schools in this country. There are fee schools and no fee. Maybe the fee schools, those are the schools that will go back, but the no fee schools will go. And I think in this country, no fee schools are more than the fee schools. And that's exactly what we are saying. And it's true. When the minister was saying, yes, if you don't want to bring your child, and I don't think parents are saying, no, we don't want to bring our children. We are saying, please, please, there are things that they can meet. I mean, they can talk to the Department of Water and Sanitation to bring the JoJos in the schools the way there's no water. Bring JoJos there. We are saying to bring JoJos, and then we know that now, at least when you go, you say, no, in the schools here, they don't have water, but the government has brought in the JoJos. Or the government, central government must intervene as well. The central government must intervene. It must not be a question of department. They must intervene so that now they address some of these things. I mean, the question of homework, and they're saying homeschooling. I don't know anything about maths. I don't know anything about physics and all those. Then I must organize teachers to come and teach my children at home, because I can't teach. I don't know what is teaching, but you're saying, and we don't know the process. How from now, if we apply to say, no, we want homeschooling, maybe they accept in September already. Now, these are some of the things that I've mentioned the question of data. It is true. When we say question of the PPEs, sanitation, how do we sanitize? It's true that these children are going to share the books. I mean, when you listen to the debates of the cigarette, that the smokers are sharing the cigarette and they ban the cigarette because they don't want the smokers to share the cigarette. These children are going to share the textbooks. They share the textbooks, they are going to share the textbooks with their parents at home and all those things. So those things really, if then we have a plan to say, this is how we are going to sanitize the textbooks. Before, when they use them, then we sanitize them. And when they go home, we sanitize them. And those things really that are easy to be placed in a plan so that we know that there is a plan. But if really, when we say safety first in the schools, then it sounds like say, no, let's close this. We have never said schools must be closed, but we are saying when schools are reopened, there must be safety. They may not be all the non-negotiable to be addressed. It's true. Comrade Mary is right. She's correct. If this school need some millions to be revamped or just to be brought down and build a new school, I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible. But let's involve the communities. Let's involve the communities. What is it that we do? So the community can also improvise if we cannot do. But involve us. Tell us. Open it. Say, no, we can't do. But what can the communities? The community will have ideas. They can improvise. Their children can go back.
All right. Thank you, Matakanye. Mary Nongato, please respond to the queries or questions that have been raised. And after you have, we'll quickly dash into the questions that might be raised. We'll see what is on Facebook and try to bring that. And we don't have much time, comrades. If you could keep your responses quite short and limited, but very clear, and the way you've been doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayanda. Please feel free to stop me if I'm saying too much. I think I want to make 2 points. One is about social distancing, and the second is I want to talk frankly about COVID. Let me start by talking frankly about COVID. COVID is going to be with us for the next 18 months, 2 years. Who's to say? But that's what the current information is. And I think that we need to be realistic about what's going to happen with COVID. The latest science, and the person that I work with most closely is Prof. Mahdi, is 60 to 70% of people are going to be infected. We must get used to that. As we speak in this grouping, I think there's about 20 of us, more than half of us are going to get this thing. But you know what? Most of us, and up to 80% of the people who get COVID, won't know they've got it. They will be asymptomatic, their temperatures won't show, they won't even know. And of that, the people who get it, about 20% or so will feel a little bit sick, and they'll stay at home and, drink lemon and whatever. It's only a small percentage that are going to be hospitalized. And the people that are going to be hospitalized are the people who are at risk because of age, because of comorbidities. And obviously we get exceptions like Comrade Vavi, who had to go to hospital. But COVID is there. Now what that means is that we have to decide, are we going to suspend everything for the next 18 months, or are we going to stop all schools? That is unsustainable. So what we have to do is to get schools ready. I absolutely feel very strongly that schools are not ready. And fundamentally, I believe it's because the key stakeholders aren't talking. I think if we took some time, and that would be a matter of weeks, to get the key stakeholders talking to each other, being on the same page, and then being able to communicate confidently to parents, we can then start talking about opening schools. Now, opening schools with social distancing, what does that mean? At the moment, the DBE is saying that we can only have half of the children in school that are normally there. So for the question that said, what about social distancing in my context? Every context is going to be different. That means timetabling is the first task of the school management team when schools come back. For these number of learners, in order to have half of them at school, some of them are going to platoon, might be one option. The platooning will mean that maybe I'll just make it up as I go along, because it's going to depend on the context. For a secondary school, grade 12s come every day, but grade 11s come one day, grade 10s come the other day, grade 9s come the other day, grade 8s come the other day. Social distancing means that we have to have different timetable arrangements. Some schools will say, let the grade 11s come between 8 and 10, let the grade 9s come between 10 o'clock and 12 o'clock, but schools are going to have to make their arrangements, which is where Comrade Tux is correct, is that those plans can only be developed by the school management team together with the school governing body, with the community, to say, what can we do with the available space in order to support as many learners as possible. But the social distancing is a non-negotiable in terms of the fact that we need a distance of 1.5 meters between everyone. We need to be realistic about these safety precautions. I noticed that, I think it was Elijah Manga posted on Twitter yesterday, a video of classes being sanitized. It was so laughable because it was so useless. The worker was sort of spraying half the desk. So the germs are only going to be on one half of the desk. He was leaving the desk half unsanitized. It's better that we have a clear understanding of the simple truths about the virus and understand the procedures that we're putting into place. Learners and parents need to understand those procedures. Yeah, let me pause. You said I must be short. Sorry.
Yes. Comrades, those who have questions, sorry, Nongodo, before you commence, those who have questions, if you could raise your hands quickly. I'm looking at questions that are coming in right now, and we'll obviously be quickly dashing to Facebook before we close for the evening. But for now, let me allow you, Nongodo, to speak.
I'm so
Briefly.
grateful that we're having this conversation on this platform, because I'm hoping that the school communities that matter most to us, rural and township context, can at least get some of this information to just ease some of the anxieties as we open.
Oh, Nongodo, you're cracking up quite badly. We cannot hear anything you say.
Also,
Nongodo, shall we skip you for now? And perhaps, Nongodo, because we cannot hear what you're saying. And then, is there, we will quickly go to Facebook and see what we have. Nongodo, can you hear me?
And then community.
Sia, can you take
cautious of the anxiety, the inaccessibility of the information to us.
Sia, can you take us to Facebook, please? So we quickly look at the questions that we might have there. Here we go. Shall I start with, is this Wiesman Hamilton? The government's return to school decision confirms what the entire pandemic strategy of the ANC government has reaffirmed, that the interests of the working class are the least of this capitalist government's concern. Lebuchang Bongani Panyeko. Message to Professor Mary. Revolution is not a bed of roses. So my dear Prof, we are entering a very painful path that needs us all with fighting spirit. We are not ready, non-negotiable. We got Leon, schools not ready. Yes, take the time. So best to ensure 100% and restrict the possibility as our children's lives are more important. Also, so teachers, etc. Why open now? When it cannot be contained, daily infections are on the increase. Why open up when the peak still not here? We got Mahlokwana. The people, sorry, that just jumped now. Mahlokwana, the people are desperate to get out children to school. They raise suspicious on a motive side. Well, I suppose in all, those are people that are indicating that they are not happy with the opening of schools quite yet. They believe that we should probably hold on and get ready first. And yeah. Nongato, are you back? Nongato? Mary, do you want to, I think there's one point, perhaps I think you've adequately clarified that one to say we cannot hold everything, we cannot put everything on hold, but we should do what we can do, and those that can should open, and that's been your position. I guess the person who addresses a question directly to you opposes your opinion on that. So I don't think there's much response to be made on these Facebook concerns. Mary, you want to come in?
I do want to come in because I don't want to be misunderstood. Is that
yes,
schools cannot open until the school is ready. Mm-hmm. The non-schools have to be in place, and an issue that I've raised as often and as I can in the media is that it's not for the minister to determine that schools are safe. She cannot know that. It's for the school governing body, the school management team, and the community to come together to understand the measures that are in place at a school and to be convinced that that learners and teachers are going to be safe. Teachers are the most at-risk group in the school, and workers in the school are the most at-risk group together with the teachers. So if you want to know if your school should open, as a parent, you need to work with your school governing body to support the school management team, to know that surfaces are going to be sanitized, hands are going to be washed, that there's processes to support the learners to understand when to use the masks. That is a community process. And if schools can't meet the criteria, if there's no water, if there's no soap, it doesn't have to be sanitizers. The external covering of the virus can just as easily be broken with soap and water. But the conditions have to be monitored by the school. When things are not safe, the community must say, we're not going to open the school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I was most pleased about in the president's address, because he said, schooling, parents must decide. Parents must decide, and therefore parents must also take responsibility. So if we're going to be
Mary,
out,
if I could just interject on that one, I think what is being said is that the concerns that are coming through is that it should not be left to as a group of parents at a particular area. It should be a national position. And I think you've adequately explained that, you know, no school should be opened unless they're ready. And of course, if you're not ready, you don't open, but we cannot hold everybody at ransom. Those that are ready should proceed as per the president's presentation. Am I correct? I just wanted to rush to one more point. I think there's Comrade Desai. He has a concern about the trade unions, the school, the unions. Oh, that message has just escaped me now. The unions. And of course, everyone keeps coming back to the point that Mary is trying so hard to explain, to say that schools should not all close. Those that are ready should proceed, and those that are not ready should not continue. Matakanya's point, like many of you, is that let us do everything at the same time. You know, if we're opening schools, let's not be happy that some, the privileged, are enjoying the privilege while the majority are not. Those are two opinions, and perhaps we should continue with this discussion, considering these two strong opinions that are coming through at another time. But comrades, next week, there's a lot of concern about, you want to hear from teachers, you want to hear from learners, you want to hear from the unions. Next week, we will proceed on Tuesday next week, same time, 7 p.m. We will be talking to the frontliners of education, where they will tell us what is their experience and how they feel. And perhaps from there, we will also look at how then do we take forward the conversation of, should education proceed where it can and leave the majority of schools out because they cannot? Is that the fairest thing to do? Because that seems to be the strong thing that comes out today. So I'm gonna have to ask for your permission to close this session. I'm worried about the time, and I've been receiving, those who have my number, receiving text messages requesting that we hold on, and they're concerned about their data. Some are being disconnected. Noncedo, they want to hear from you before we close off, but I think we still have problems with Noncedo. So we will continue with this discussion next week, comrades, with the frontliners of education. But for today, let me thank my panelists, Matakanye, Mary, Noncedo. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the participants. Thank you for the questions that you've raised. We will definitely consolidate them and try to bring them up in our next session. And thank you to the SAFTU media team. And for tonight, it's good night, comrades. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ayanda. Thank you all.